Brisk and to the point, gun crazy, in its disinterest with being high art, manages to outshine the later film it's most compared to, the film which wears its existentialism and pathos on its sleeve. That later film was Bonnie and Clyde, and while Bonnie and Clyde is indeed its own masterpiece, well shot, acted, and conceived, there's something just so pure, so unalloyed within the simple genre storytelling of Gun Crazy. Its world uninhabited by anything which sits outside the confines of its own story that propels the film to its true place as the champion of the run and gun existentialism and gender politics that Bonnie and Clyde, in all its art house seriousness and new Hollywood experimentation, could only ever be second fiddle to. The reason for this, if I can find one, probably has to do with Gun Crazy's simplicity, which when filtered by the language of film becomes inseparable from the archetypes it utilizes, making it an examination of what lies beneath said archetypes. The questions that the film asks are simple. What is love? What is obsession? What defines a good or bad man? When does confronting danger become recklessness or even evil? When are those who are outcasted by society worse than the society they feel compelled to rebel against? All of these things, and sticking to the conventions of filmmaking, are better expressed here than in Bonnie and Clyde, simply because our minds have no other ledge to perch themselves on. We loom down at these themes, these questions, these scenarios, because there's nothing else to examine, the floor below us being so stark and devoid of clutter. The benefit of genre filmmaking is that it poeticizes through story, action, and dialogue alone, the filmmaking being primarily used as a tool to tell the story, not to accentuate it with adorning poetical flourishes. Likewise, this lack of adornment is what makes this film's characterization so archetypal. Bart is a nice guy. Everything about this character is demonstrated through dialogue, acting, and directing implies this to us. Likewise, Laurie is an enticing but dangerous femme fatale. We learn that in her very first scene in the movie. That scene in of itself ties danger to sexuality, conflict to love, and talent to violence. All of this happens on a stage. While much of Gun Crazy was shot on location, the metaphor of the stage representing entertainment in general, and therefore film itself, still stands strong. The characters skirt danger on this stage, the way characters in film often do, but in true film noir fashion. The happy ending demonstrated here is in stark contrast to the ending of the film, which implies that romances of this heat and intensity rarely end up well in the real world. It's only a stage show happening in the middle of a carnival, no less, which can create the illusion that happiness of this kind is possible. Though, one aspect of the stage show does serve to illustrate a deeper truth. When both shooters aim at their opponent's headdress of matches, Laurie manages to miss one match and ends up beaten when Bart hits all 5 on her own head. There are two things which can be gleaned from this. One, Bart possesses some great trait that Laurie is missing, namely empathy for others and level-headedness. Two, Bart's love for Laurie is at least one notch purer than her love for him, signaling to the audience that bad things are to come and that she'll end up being disproportionately responsible for them. The film's most impressive scene though is the tracking shot taken from the back of a car. At first, the moment can almost be mistaken for a rear screen projection, but as the scene continues, it becomes obvious that what we're seeing is real and shot on location. Logistically, the long lead up to the bank robbery, beyond just being technically impressive, sets us up for understanding this moment as one happening within the busy and frenetic locale of a small town. By setting things up this way, it establishes this moment as one of many within this town, the world around it continuing before, during, and after these moments of tension and conflict. Once the robbery happens, we know that escape is necessary, and the streets of this town, with their limitless avenues, residences, businesses, and bystanders, only serve to make it understood that this is the anonymity these characters are disappearing back into. When that anonymity is later robbed of them by the infamy of their crimes, those same streets and bystanders become themselves like enemies, nodes for obstruction and conflict. This type of lived-in film experience feels underutilized in most films, even to this day. Ironically, it may have been the film's low budget, and therefore on-location shooting, which led to this peculiar effect. Ultimately, the biggest point of comparison between Gun Crazy and Bonnie and Clyde is their similar ending. This might be the one regard where Bonnie and Clyde outstrips Gun Crazy in thematic power. Unsurprisingly, it's the only scene in Bonnie and Clyde which is more stripped down and basic. Both films end abruptly, but where Gun Crazy caps off its final scene with melancholy from our two protagonist assassins, Bonnie and Clyde's sadness regarding their own fate dies just where they do, with those responsible, and happy to be as much, being the only ones left alive in the frame. It's us, the audience, who are left watching on, carrying that heavy load. And because we carry it alone, it only weighs on us all that much more mercilessly.